Hey all, I'm so sorry I'm not able to be in class today, but the good news is that you really just have the entire class period to work on your slides for your 1920s heroes or villains sort of mini research project. I want to go through just a couple things to help kind of set you up for success with that project, and then you are free to continue working for as much time as you need. The final slides are not due until the end of class on Wednesday, April 14th. So not quite a week from today, but in the middle of next week. And what we'll do the last day that we're all together for class is we'll look at all of that whole gallery of images of historical figures that you have put together. And we'll do one last piece of writing for a grade. So just like we were in a regular normal class, I'm going to share my screen with you and go through the agenda that I would have been presenting were I live in class today, as well as a couple of resources to help you work on your project. So hopefully you've learned a couple things about your historical figure at this point. I want to spend a little bit of time at the top of this lesson talking about bucketing your evidence, right? Which is a term that I think we've used before in this class. You may also remember it from World History last year. And it has to do with how do you organize the evidence that you've collected so that it can best support the argument that you're trying to make. And not everything that you have found about your historical figure may make sense to include for this particular assignment. So bucketing is a way to help you focus on what you need and maybe edit out anything that is extra or that isn't actively supporting the point that you're trying to make. I also want to go through places to find primary sources, and then we'll talk just for a couple minutes about how to actually create your slides for this project. So one thing you've learned about your person, you can kind of think about that question. And I want to just kind of give you an example of what your research may look like at this point. So if I were doing the historical figure Al Jolson, and let's say I've read a couple of articles about this person, I may have kind of a list of some factoids at this point, some small pieces of information about this individual. So from what I've read, Al Jolson was someone who inspired Judy Garland, Jackie Wilson, Bob Dylan. He was a Jewish immigrant from Lithuania. He starred in the first full-length talking picture, big landmark in Hollywood history, a film called The Jazz Singer, which you may have actually seen some of in class a couple of weeks ago. He started out working in the circus, which I think is kind of cool. He was the biggest star of his time on Broadway, the highest paid performer and most famous actor of the 1920s. He also performed in blackface. That was the major part of his act. That was sort of the thing that he was most well known for. His father was a rabbi and a cantor. He had very, very deep roots with his religious upbringing. He was one of the first stars to entertain troops in World War II and the Korean War to help boost the morale of men serving in the army. And he is also sometimes criticized for appropriating African-American music like jazz and spiritual music into the minstrel shows that he would perform in. So I have kind of this cloud of information about this person. And I want to go back to this idea of bucketing and think about how would I look at all of that information, which maybe, I've taken in some notes to try to determine what are the pieces of information that sort of fit with the idea that he is maybe a hero of the 1920s, and what are the pieces of information that fit with the idea that perhaps he is more of a villain of the 1920s. And you'll notice from what's on my list here, not every single one of these details perfectly fits into one of those two buckets. And so while it might be really interesting that he started out working in the circus, or that he was a Jewish immigrant, or that he had kind of these deep religious connections in his family, those details may not be that meaningful for me in trying to answer this question, should he be considered a hero or a villain? So I just might not include those. Even though I've learned them in my research and maybe I've even taken some notes on them, they're probably not going to make it to my final PowerPoint slide. So just going through the bits of information I have found, I have this information about kind of the positive contributions that he made to American performance history and film history, working to support the American military effort in kind of a artistic way during World War II and the Korean War. But obviously the bad really stands out for me as well when I think about Al Jolson. Performing in blackface is something that not only is it sort of gross and offensive, but the minstrel shows where white performers are performing in blackface really perpetuate incredibly harmful stereotypes and racist imagery among white audiences during a time when we also know that there's deep racial divisions in the United States. We know that the Klan was on the rise again in the 1920s. And these sort of performances, even though they're made just for entertainment purposes, are certainly not helping heal any sort of race relations in America. So as I'm thinking about writing my final paragraph, answering the question, should he be considered a hero or a villain? I might want to kind of weigh what's in these two buckets. And the next thing I want to talk about is, where are you going to find some primary sources? You need at least 3 sources for this project. One of them should be a primary source for a 4, and obviously that's the minimum for a 4. So you can certainly have more sources than that as well. And a couple of people have asked in class, in our last class, about using ABC Clio, Gale in Context, some of the sources that you may have used, or the locations that you may have used online to do research for History Fair, and you can certainly continue using those sources as well. But I wanted to highlight 3 more, which are this website called History Matters, which is put together by George Mason University. It's a survey course, but it also has a search engine in it where you can type in the name of a historical figure and find information about that person. The National Archives is also a repository. It's connected to the Library of Congress. They have lots and lots and lots of documents about American history. I think the National Archives website is a little bit easier to manage than the Library of Congress website. So this is another good place to look. And then the last thing that's on here is a research guide or a library guide from Christopher Newport University. I don't know anything about this particular school, but their librarians have done, I think, a really good job of putting together some information in one place. So all of these are posted on Schoology, and I will pop over to my web browser to show you what each of these look like as well. So the first one that we're looking at here is the Christopher Newport University. You can see there's a search bar up here. They also have all of these kind of drop downs in here that you can choose from. So there's one that's called Notable People. That might be a good place to start for some of you. If you're doing, Warren G. Harding, for example, who is one of the presidents of this decade, they kind of have some resources already put together for some of these folks. So in this case, you have a picture of him. They have a couple of primary sources, right? A speech that he gave for his inauguration, State of the Union. So this is a good place to look, especially if you have chosen one of these notable people. But even if you haven't, if you just search in this guide, let's say I search for someone like Al Jolson. And I think when I did this before, yeah, he doesn't come up, but you can get a little bit creative with your searching. And let's say I'm going to search for the movie, The Jazz Singer. And then I do get a link to this primary source of the film, The Jazz Singer. So I could potentially use some images from here or find something else. Sometimes when you go into library guides, you're kind of falling down the rabbit hole a little bit in a good way. And you can just kind of pick up the breadcrumbs here to find your way to a source that will work for your project. So that is the library guide. This is the National Archives. Again, you can, the search bar up here at the top, let's say I want to do a search for Al Jolson. And again, I'm going to get some teacher information, which sometimes is helpful, even if you're not a teacher. Information about, oh, this is kind of cool. This is an outfit worn by Al Jolson. So it's literally a costume from a film that he was in, which is kind of interesting. So that could count as a primary source, right? If I wanted to, I don't know how I would use this particular primary source, but you can kind of get creative with how you're using the resources that you find. And then the last option that I put out there, this History Matters, survey course. Again, I'm just going to use their search bar, type in the name of my historical figure, and I get a lot of links on here as well. So a timeline of American literature, information about music and American life, an exhibit of music and documents. So I might want to look at something like that and see if maybe I could find an example of one of these songs from, oh, can't find that page. What is another part of the research experience? But in any case, so then I might just try something else, right? And see if I can maybe find a song from this individual that I could include in my PowerPoint slide. So in this case, the Library of Congress is working, and they have a lot of different songs that you can listen to from the National Jukebox, which is kind of cool. So that is, those are some places to find primary sources. Once you've done that and you are ready to actually start creating your slides, there's really two ways you can do it. This is my second period class's slide deck. So we looked at these examples in our last class. And when you're ready to add your slide to the mix, all you have to do is just kind of come up here and, you know, hit the new slide button. And you can add it directly into this file. So you can change the font, if you want this to be in, you know, this sort of font. You can change the background color of the slide if you want it to be blue or something like that. However you want to design it, that's totally up to you. The other thing that you can do is if you want to create your slides in a separate Google Slides presentation, let's say you created a new presentation and made your 2 slides in there, you could just copy them and then come back in here when you're done and paste them. The last thing I want to highlight is that this little box down here at the bottom, so underneath the slide itself, which you can manipulate however you need to get all of your information on there, where it says click to add speaker notes, this is where you're going to put your bibliographic citations. And just a reminder, these are going to be more than just a link. You need to have the full citation that has the author, the publication, the article or webpage title, the full URL, the date that you accessed it. If you need to review that information, that's all in the History Fair folder right here on in Schoology. And we will also be going over that as kind of the last piece of putting your project all together during our class on Wednesday, and when these will be due. So that's what I've got for you. Good luck. I really look forward to seeing your slides and what you guys are able to come up with and learning more about the historical figures that have stood out to you. As always, email me if you need anything, and I will look forward to talking to you guys soon.